Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's ContainerJournal.com webinar, brought to you by Techstrong, AWS, and Kubecost. My name is Cody J. Brown. I'm the host of Techstrong Learning. We have an exciting panel ahead of us, but first I have just a couple of housekeeping notes. First off, today's session is being recorded, so if you missed any of our discussion, or you would like to rewatch or share with a friend, the on-demand recording will be made available shortly after we conclude our live webinar today. If you have any questions for our speakers, we want you to submit those to the Q&A tab on the right side of the screen. We'll try to get to those, as many of those as we can towards the end of the program, but be sure to send them in early. And if you have any other just general comments or you want to let us know from where you're tuning in, we want you to use the chat tab for that. Finally, at the conclusion of our webinar, we will be giving away 4 $25 Amazon gift cards, so be sure to stick around to see if you're one of our 4 lucky winners. So today we'll be discussing implementing Kubernetes Chargeback on AWS, and I'm joined today by Zach Dunn, Senior Manager in Software Development at Appian, and Young Jung, Partner Solutions Architect at Amazon Web Services. Zach and Young, thank you both so much for being here with me, but why don't we have both of you introduce yourselves a little bit more? So Zach, you want to get us started?
Yeah, happy to. My name's, like it says on the slide, Zach Dunn. I'm actually now Director of Software Development. Basically, my role at Appian is that of what we call a group development lead. So I lead a group of teams, and our principal mission is to deliver the platform that Appian builds and runs our cloud-native stack on. So I'm very interested in things around cloud and Kubernetes and how we pay for it. So that's why I'm here today.
Thank you. And Young, you want to go?
Yeah, sure. Thanks everyone for joining. My name is Young Jung. I am a partner SA here at AWS or Amazon Web Services. My focus is around containers and application modernization, this idea of bringing customers and partners to our more cloud native approach around containers. So you may have heard of our services like ECS or EKS. There we're talking about Kubernetes, obviously, but supporting our partners in particular in those areas to help build our EKS ecosystem a little further. And throughout our discussion, you'll hear us talk about Kubecost in more detail. Is one of our partners that focuses on cost visibility and in turn cost allocation of your EKS workloads. So happy to be here, and yeah, let's get this going.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you both being here. So let's get things started. So Zach, why don't you tell us more about Appian and the specific projects that you work on?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if everyone knows, but Appian is a low-code platform. And what that means is you can take those Visios or that style of thinking that we're all very used to, and that becomes your application. And that's it, right? It's 10 times faster, 50% cheaper. You can take business processes and not have to be what we call a high-code developer and turn that into an actual application amazingly, very quickly. The strength, of course, there is like anybody can turn, I can build some logical diagrams and it's, oh, this is so exciting, right? The strength there is our ability to do things with our platform. We have RPA, the robotic process automation, as well as process mining. So we can take data and actually integrate in other systems. And that integration key point is really what's so exciting because you're able to take these processes, you're able to build them into data sources you already have or ones you want, and then build complete end-to-end solutions all inside of our platform. And so Appian's a pretty big company, I'd like to think. And been around since '99. Been working, hosting the product since about 2008. And so, what really I do there is I help build that platform for the hosted portion. So a lot of the things we're working on there are how do we have a cloud native platform? How do we have something that's powered by technologies like EKS? How does that work when we've had a platform that we've built and run successfully for literally well over a decade? Those are real challenges, right? I mean, that's not something that's just that. The way I like to think of it is that thing pays my mortgage. I'd like it to keep paying my mortgage. We just can't go and break that for our customers, right? And those are different problems, right? Like I've worked at startups. If you don't have market fit, you can go and break stuff, right? And that's okay because you haven't found market fit yet. You can do that. Once you actually have people paying your mortgage and you have them paying for your product, now you have to figure out how to keep that and sustain it and keep it moving forward. So sort of in the vein of what Young was talking about, that application modernization, it's always, in tech, kind of a question of keeping up with the Joneses, right? We want to be in a position where we can consume the latest and the greatest and turn around and present that right back to our customers. And so that's sort of where we fit in, or I fit.
So tell us a little about Appian's AWS journey so far. It seems like since this has been going on for a few years, tell us a little bit about those challenges and when did Appian start using AWS? What primary services are you leveraging?
Yeah, so the interesting thing about Appian, and I've only been at Appian, just for the complete transparency, only been here about a year and 4 months. So the interesting thing to me is that a company like Appian, we've been around for a while, have had a successful product for a long time. There's no like data center migration story here, right? So you can kind of, we're not that company. Appian's been running in the cloud with AWS since 2008. One of the first people to run there, where they went in, and a lot of those patterns initially looked like patterns where you would have EC2 instances. And that was our principal consumption, right? We had EC2 instances. This was our bread and butter for a very long time. Grew, adopted, we've taken on more, of course, like VPCs and those features, and we've leveraged S3 along the way. However, what we're doing now is really looking to lean into not just the sort of the hardware replacement side of the cloud, but leaning into the managed services as well as some of the workplace services. So a lot of the things we leverage are things like EKS, right? We're going to let Amazon run the backplane of our clusters for us. We're also going to leverage we also leverage a lot of the workspace and code build setups. And we're beginning to, and we have leveraged since the beginning, a much more intricate network stack, so that when we're building and running this global footprint, and we're in, I believe it's 19 regions, we have a fairly sophisticated network there, and we're doing all that by leveraging and consuming AWS resources.
So what led to the decision to invest heavily in microservices, architectures, especially EKS?
Yeah, and I think the challenge with any of this, right, is we have a product that's successful. We want to deliver to impact, and that's a real big thing for us in Appian. We always talk about how we deliver value, and it's not delivering value by getting the scorecard in front of you done, getting their tasks done, and closing out a sprint. That's not value, right? And that's not. We want to deliver to impact. We want to get to the point where, hey, I did 50% of the work, but man, like our customer's already seeing this work for them. This is amazing. Like, let's do the rest, or maybe not. Or we delivered everything in the sprint. It doesn't matter. We have to keep going. We got to get to impact. So in that spirit, what we want to be able to do is have service owners who can independently deliver to impact, right? We don't want to dictate like, hey, you've got this platform and you need to deliver on this cadence, and you have these are your channels for delivering, and these are your patterns. And we put in a lot of constraints that way. Well, when we get constraints, what we're really saying is I want you to go slower, and I want you to potentially create a lot of workarounds in the meantime. I don't think if you put that to any executive, they would say, "Oh, that sounds great. You guys should all slow down and maybe take a little bit longer to deliver the features." Right? That's just I've never been in that position before. What we really are being told, and what we really want to do, is we want to deliver faster. We want to be able to take advantage of these things as they these services as they come out. Whether it's trying to figure out how to work in machine learning, or how to better take advantage of elastic scale. When we're saying we want to do that all in one go for the entire platform, like now you're in a big bang situation, and shocker, it will blow up in your face. Like that's why it's called a big bang. So instead, what we want to be able to do is say we have these tools, we have these patterns, we have these ways of delivering increments of value. And we want to be able to deliver those in a way that it's independent of one another and we don't get in each other's ways. The way we chose to do that is with Kubernetes. We leverage a lot of open source tools to do it. Big fans of things like Argo CD that allow us to really empower our developers. And don't worry about where you're running. Make sure you run, and we'll get you out there. And so for us, this transition to microservices is really about changing how we build and deliver software, right? Traditionally, we're building and delivering software in a pattern that it works, right? But we want to be faster. We want to get to impact faster. We want to deliver a bigger impact. How are we going to do that? We're going to do that through this platform.
So, Young, from your perspective at AWS, how has Kubernetes adoption influenced the architecture discussions you have with customers on a more broad basis?
Yeah, I think Zach hit on a lot of points, and obviously Appian was more cloud native from the get-go. So there is a less transition of, this idea of application modernization or, becoming more cloud native. That in itself is a long road, and you as a C-suite or a higher up in a company kind of has to weigh the good and the bads of making that transition. And sometimes that's not a full transition. There might be some parts that they're taking piecewise, something that's greenfield that they might be deploying in a more cloud native approach using microservices. So there's a lot of that discussion. Me as a solutions architect, where I come in is once you make that sort of decision, how are we going to deliver this at scale? Because at the end of the day, the agility and the way to just make that impact the business in a much quicker way by delivering in different services or having different owners is, once you make that decision, the way to go at a full scale. And a lot of discussion with that is around, how do we scale effectively when it comes to Kubernetes or EKS? A lot of this discussions around no selection, auto scaling, and it goes back to kind of creating these different environments, I guess. Test dev, sort of segmenting into different environments, doing your testing and being able to deliver based on what type of workloads you're going to need to implement different type of nodes or node groups. And I think another point that Zach hit earlier is thinking in terms of SDLC. So how do you deliver your software? How do you segregate between your infrastructure team and your application team, so that your application team only needs to worry about, making changes, shipping your applications quickly into, test dev or prod. Obviously, within the prod, you need a more careful review process. But just a couple more things I'll add there is leveraging infrastructure as code to provision your infrastructure and leveraging GitOps. Like he said, Argo CD is a great tool to enable applications teams to be able to deliver their products without having to worry about that. Where is it going, or does that infrastructure exist? So we have a lot of those discussions and guidance around what the team or the customer should be doing. And we always take customer feedback. So as they leverage EKS and the features that come with it and how it works within the overall Kubernetes ecosystem, because there's a lot of toolings, open source toolings or otherwise, that are part of the Kubernetes environment or the ecosystem. And EKS obviously ties in very closely in working with a lot of those toolings. We also take customer feedbacks and try to implement features within EKS. Some of the things like you may or may not have heard of, managed Prometheus or managed Grafana. So a lot of discussions that happen that's sort of born from this concept of Kubernetes and EKS and AWS.
So what about managed Prometheus? We've seen this coming up a lot, and AWS recently launched their own service for this. Zach, is this something that you expect to leverage as part of your EKS adoption?
So we actually, for Kubecost, adopted AMP. And so for us, it made sense. What we were trying to do was roll out a service. And again, we were trying to get it out the door quickly. there was a lot of unknowns in sort of the telemetry we'd need to collect. What would this load do? Does it make sense to throw all this load into our normal observation system? Is that something that we would, kind of want to coordinate around? And then in the spirit of sort of independently iterating and being able to deliver value quickly, we're paying customer of Kubecost, right? When you cut that check, you feel like the clock's ticking. So one of the things we made a point of was saying what we want to do is prove the value of this tool as quickly as possible, and reduce the scope of what it would take to prove value from it. So in doing that, what we said is like, well, let's stand up AMP, right? We can have AMP stood up in, for all of our regions, in short order. And we can do that independently of having to introduce extra load into our observation system if we feel like, and coordinating with that team, interrupting their sprint, saying, hey, I need you to do this analysis. Can you take this many metrics? Hold on, let me go do a bunch of analysis. Hold on, let me figure out how to do that analysis. Let me go through that whole rigmarole. So we made the decision to go with AMP and to work towards actually helping Kubecost work better with AMP. It's open source. It's an implementation of Prometheus and Cortex, I believe, underneath. But there's still, everybody makes decisions when they do implementations, right? So we're very lucky because we were able to work with both of them to be able to say, like, look, we want you guys to work together. And luckily, Kubecost is a partner of AWS. We happen to be a partner of AWS as well. So that worked out great. And we were able to kind of take that portion of like, hey, how are we going to get this TSDB portion of this operation off the ground, and just kind of set it to the side, right? And we said, like, let's just put that over to the side. Let's get out there. Let's demonstrate there's value in doing chargeback, showback, that there's visibility and cost accounting exercise that we want to go through. Like, this is actually the right thing to do. Because at the end of the day, if it's not, we can just shut it down. Right. And if it turns out, hey, this is this thing and it's so great, and like, hey, we wanna just incorporate it into our principal observation stack. Okay, well, like, let's put that on the backlog, let's get that planned, and let's roll it over there. Being able to have flexibility to leverage something like AMP and then make more incremental decisions as we go is really hugely powerful, right? It lets us make those decisions in the context of actually where we're at. If we're at a cycle and it's like, man, we really have this amazing initiative to go land, this customer, we all have to be, working together and rowing in the same direction. The last thing I want to say is I'd really like you guys, but you see, I've got to replace this TSDB right now so that I can deliver value out of this. It's not going to happen, right? What we're going to end up doing is dropping the thing we thought we were going to deliver value with, work towards delivering something else, and then have to go back and pick up the pieces. So for us, being able to turn something up like AMP has been great.
So since making that shift to containers, how much faster are you bringing apps to market?
Yeah, so it's funny. We made the shift to containers a while ago, and that's also, I think, one of the things I understand as part of what Appian does is while we host Appian is something also our customers can host. So for us, being able to deliver sort of pre-built, very determined objects and I think it is like kind of first wave containerization. Basically we were able to take as much of the OS as we needed and then the application and turn it into a binary that people could run somewhere, right? So when we got to that point, that was a huge win, because then we could say, like, hey, just run these containers, guys. Like, here, you don't have to just here, change this entry point, change these configuration options, you're good. And that was a big step, right? Because now we have a packaging. The adoption from there was since we're already in those waters, we're already swimming in this, like, let's build these essentially like, processes to be scheduled. The next step with that was obviously like Kubernetes. And I think the primitive we always kind of walk away from is like the metaphor that Kubernetes works on is jobs, right? And really, I think Kelsey Hightower said it, like, we shouldn't think of Kubernetes as like the Linux of the cloud. It's really the systemd. For good or bad, whatever you think about systemd, it's about scheduling jobs, right? And scheduling these things. What we really were able to say to our service owners was, hey, you're still going to you're going to containerize your stuff. You already do that. Don't think about how to run this in the same life cycle as the rest of our product. We want you to build this and deliver it independently. And so that independence is important, right? Because now we're not saying we're going to have to deliver, again, everything in these big bangs. We're going to say like, hey, go deliver incremental improvement. So time to market, of course, is faster, right? Like we've got teams who can turn out whole new features that get announced, in big flashy presentations and, matters of months. But what is sort of more impressive to me is that the team gets to continue to iterate, right? Like getting something out the door in 6 months to me isn't impressive, right? Like everybody can do that. There's a quality of life issue and there's some quality maybe issues after the fact. But really, what's impressive is if you can keep doing it. And so for us, that's where like the containerization, microservices, those things start to come to play, because it's what you get to do after release that's so important.
So Young, is that something that you're kind of seeing across the board with a lot of your users?
Yeah, I would agree with pretty much all of the points there, and even internally, as we're doing some of these projects and we're deploying it on our internal testing EKS cluster environment, we're continuing to iterate for the next thing. Obviously, quality check on the ones that have already been delivered also needs to be taken into consideration. But as he mentioned, a lot of the customers are really seeing the value of that within Kubernetes and EKS as a whole when they're starting to leverage, especially for a lot of customers that are making that data center move into a more cloud native approach. And I think another thing I'll mention there is that they're really seeing the power of integration with other services within AWS, and thanks to things like driver controllers that enable customers to leverage things like EBS or EFS, for example, file systems, and a lot of the other managed services that we mentioned earlier, AMP or AMG, or even for things like big data workloads, we're talking about EMR and EKS. So there's a lot of features that come out that enables them to take sort of the core of what Zach talked about and expand to different use cases, different workloads, different features that they can leverage. And as customers get more used to, or I guess more adopted, I'm not sure what the exact phrase is, of what EKS offers as a full-fledged service, they take this and they really run with it. And it continues the cycle of adoption, feedback, and this loop of feedback. And we as an AWS, the whole team, not just the SAs, but really the service team kind of looks at, what are the customers doing today, and what are the pain points that they're running into, and how could we improve it? And I think as much as great as the service team does in promoting and delivering additional features, I think this is where we also bring our partners like Kubecost to help kind of remedy or solve and better enhance the customer experience. And one of the things that customers often ask, and I think this would be a great place to kind of get into that, is, we have this cluster, we have this environment, how do we track cost?
Yeah. So on that note, Zach, what is Appian doing to put emphasis on the cloud economics and tracking those costs?
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, that's why we're here today, right? Obviously, spoiler, we chose Kubecost for this, but a lot of it is about bringing visibility to things, right? One of the amazing things that these consumptive models have given us is ease of consumption, right? AWS does a great job of making it so that you can spin up an EKS cluster. If you're clever and you've done a lot of infrastructure code, you can make that automated and make it even faster. And then we hit what's called Jenneman's paradox. I'm not sure if everybody knows this. It's worth a Google. But basically, it states that if you have, for economics, if you have elastic demand and you increase the efficiency of something, you will actually increase the demand of something. So the real life example of this would be if you make cars more efficient, people drive more miles because it costs the same amount of money. So you're going to drive more miles. So what happens? People still use more gas. So there's this paradox of we made cars more efficient, people should use less gas. No, we made cars more efficient, they drove more miles, they're using actually more gas because it's more convenient. And so we've created this big demand. We have the same problem in cloud, right? We've made it so efficient and so easy to consume. People consume. And then we're shocked when our bills go up, right? Or we don't know where all the money's going. Now we compound that with the idea of we have something like a multi-tenant service like EKS. You're not, I don't think many people do, some people may, launching EKS clusters and then saying, okay, we're going to put one thing in there and I know exactly what that one thing is and nothing else is running in there and I don't really care about how I'm defining the cost. Oh, and it's in one account, and that one AWS account is specifically for this one tier and type of production or stage or whatever. If you're doing that and managing that and that works for you, that's amazing. We have a tendency to have clusters that are running different loads. Those loads have different customers. They have different impact areas. They are really, our services are scaling inside of them, up and down. We want to be able to tell our service owners, hey, this is costing you this much. And right now we get a bill, and at the end of the month, AWS is like, you owe me a check, man. And internally we're all like, where's this money gonna get apportioned, right? Like, hey, marketing wanted to run this initiative and give away these sites. Which, by the way, if you want to try Appian, you can actually go try Appian for free on the community sites. And that is paid internally. Our marketing team's paying for that. Well, it still runs on my gear, right? At the end of the day, the accountants are still coming and asking, hey, who should be paying for these, 56 hours of EC2 EKS charges? I need to be able to tell them where that goes. Moreover, when our service teams go to build and develop things, part of like an agile methodology or really any decent methodology, you're going to make economic decisions. Well, any decision, the way we make better decisions is with data, right? Like if I don't have data, I can't really get to that next step of analyze, and then I can't really make a plan to do anything. So what we found was we had these, clusters, a lot of different stuff running in it. We're running hundreds of clusters, running them globally. It's not to the point, it's large enough that you just kind of can't go, well, let me just go kubectl into something and start poking around and I'll figure out my costs on a napkin. We're way past that. People are spinning up clusters and tearing them down. They've become somewhat ephemeral in a lot of our tiers. So we need to be able to track those numbers, gather that data up, and then start to present it back to consumers and say like, hey, look, this thing that you've done, you did a lot of great engineering work, you did some performance tests for scale, your concern was around getting the best performance, you're just burning money, right? You're just oversized. Or, hey, we thought when we had this hypothesis, and like good scientists, good engineers, what are we going to do? We try to disprove hypotheses. We don't try to prove them because we're trying to prove them. What we're really doing is bias, and that's not cool. Instead, what we're trying to do is disprove our hypotheses. So if we came out and said, we're going to do all this work around elastic scale, we're going to move some stuff to Lambdas, and we're going to have this interaction, we're going to use these services. How do you prove that you were right if you don't have data and you don't have visibility into that? So for us, having that visibility became crucial. We went out there, we did some work, and we landed with Kubecost for that. Because so much of our infrastructure simply is running on Kubernetes. Having something that was principally able to see into that cluster and be able to say, I understand what a namespace is. I understand what that is. I can tell you what's running there. I can ask kubestate metrics to pull some stuff out, and I'll go ahead and talk to AWS to correlate that to other AWS charges.
So placing this emphasis on cost, is this something that was just something that happened over time, or was there a particular incident that kind of broke the camel's back?
No, it's not about shame, right? Like, and I try to tell people that it's not like, we had some runaway spend and this is the work, and oh my God, we got to go to the market. It's more, we're spending dollars, right? And we need to be accountable to them. Part of this is it's a part of a maturation of any platform in my mind is that if you start off and you're spending time and effort on an R&D project, you do get to a point where you're like, okay, we want to make this a real boy. It's gonna run customer load, and we're gonna do these things. As soon as you say those words, accountants show up, because accountants are gonna want to talk to things about like COGS, right? Cost of goods and services, and they're gonna they have questions about how to like what line item does this go to, and if you start putting those people in rooms with engineers, They're just like, I don't know what those words mean, and I thought I knew a lot of acronyms. So this wasn't some like, man, we have this runaway cost and we need to get better about this. I can't believe it. It was, how do we actually, you know, we've made it so easy to turn these dials. We need to make it easy to tell people that they've turned the dial, and we need to make it easy for our business to understand where and where we're spending these dollars that we say that we're responsible for.
So how would you say Kubecost was factored into the cloud economics push, and where are you seeing the benefits the most?
Yeah, so a lot of this, you know, the way I like to think of it is where Kubecost worked for us is that it understood Kubernetes, right? Now understood like, hey, you have these workloads and I can ask specific questions about the workloads. The other real benefit for us is like I said, we run a lot of clusters and we run HA clusters, you know, and because of that, we have services that are very network intensive sometimes. And one of the things that we really struggled with was being able to pinpoint where our network spend was going. One of the deciding factors for us was around being able to get that visibility into the network stack that Kubernetes gave, or Kubecost gave us, because we had the ability to say this namespace, these pods, we're using this much networking. Now you can go back to a team and say, hey, you know how you're doing like, you know, 6-way, 9-way replication between these 3 AZs? Just can you guys make an economic decision here and just write it down? Because again, good engineers, we write stuff down. Write down that this is the expected behavior. Because they might go, ooh, yeah, we only needed 6, but we did 9 because we thought, you know, might as well double down. But yeah, we'll just knock it down to 6. Congratulations. The easiest dollar to make is the dollar you don't spend, right? So that is literally just more money we can take and use somewhere else. So the extra layer on that for us was that we could also integrate with our AWS CUR, being able to take that CUR, pull it down, the cost usage report, so CUR. So that cost usage report was really important because that has, you know, line by line breakdown of what AWS is charging you. So we can take that, we can take the cluster level details, we can take the extra little thin layer of network details, we can push that all together, and now we can really present a very clear cost to our internal service owners and say, this is how you're spending, you know, Appian's dollars. We can, you know, next steps here are like, let's talk about building projected budgets. Because then we can say like, hey, we expect the run rate of this thing to be $5,000 a month. Okay, you know, it's 4. Good job. Maybe we should tweak some stuff down so that's your budget now. Or hey, you're running at $15,000 a month. Oh yeah, we did a marketing campaign and it's blown up and we have great elastic usage. Awesome. This is exactly what the story we want to hear. And so it's not like this penaltive, you know, conversation around shame. You know, the idea I was thinking about this morning is, could you imagine if we had monitoring services that lagged by 30 days? Because that's probably how a lot of people monitor their AWS bill. They get it around this time of the month. They look at it and they go, who the hell spent $100K on this? Right? Because if you don't have visibility into it beforehand, the first time you'll hear about it, potentially, is when AWS sends that bill. At that point, it's kind of late to get ahead of it.
So what was critical for you in finding the solution for cost governance? What did you need to see from either the platform, the technology, the partner? Yeah,
so for us, there was a couple things that were critical, right? One was, like I said, that we're, you know, the vast majority of our system is being built and delivered in Kubernetes and EKS. And so we, you know, some of the solutions we looked at were very like, oh, we'll tie into your CUR. It's like, okay, well, I have 110 accounts, and a lot of that is because we have these accounts that are named for services or named for environments or whatever. So I have some granularity there already. Are you going to be able to give me more than what I get with Cost Explorer? They could parse some things and do some other things. And then there was some add into like, oh, we can tell you about these workloads from sort of an outside view. But what we didn't see was being able to take it down to the service level and being able to say to a service owner, which was one of the principal like personas that we really imagined here, was being able to say to one of those service owners, you know, this is how much your cost us last month. This is where you're trending right now. Here's the details of what is doing that. Like you're over provisioned on CPU, or your EBS volumes are out of whack, whatever. We needed to be able to not just say like, here's an analysis. We need to be able to say like, here's an analysis. It's in a language that makes sense to you, the namespaces and world you're working in. But then also, here's some details about what's actually driving those costs. And remember, we also have this concept of a service. Services just aren't things that run inside of an EKS cluster. Those are going to be composite of a lot of other consumed services inside of the AWS ecosystem. So it's even more so not just enough to be able to say, I know what's going on in Kubernetes, because that service in Kubernetes could actually be consuming 3 or 4 other services in AWS. You need to be able to tie that all back together and then present that back to a consumer, our case service owners, and be able to tell them like, hey, this is the whole picture of what you're charging. And by the way, because I'm pulling in my cur, I can align this and say, we spent this much last month. And yeah, if I add them all up, they add up to that number. So I know this number is pretty right.
Right. And Young, is cost visibility and chargeback consistent with what you're hearing from some of the other customers you're working with?
Yeah, so kind of going back to the beginning, when we talk about cost visibility within EKS and Kubernetes, based on what I've seen, there's sort of these 2 main stories. One of the stories is a lot of customers that talk about, we start from this R&D, like Zach mentioned, and we're trying to scale things out. How do we implement cost visibility and chargeback so that we don't end up with the big bill, or that we don't really know what we're spending on? Sort of this thinking of prevention is what I like to call it. On the other hand, we may have other customers who are trying to implement their prod environment, and turns out they don't have cost visibility, and they want to get more insights into why we're spending this much money in these instances. Is this a really appropriate instance size based on our workload? We have these namespaces within that different teams are leveraging their workloads for, but we don't really have an idea of who's spending how much and what can be assigned to a specific team or tenant. And regardless of which bin they belong, it kind of goes back to this notion of multi-tenancy, which Zach kind of alluded to a little bit, especially when it comes to a soft multi-tenancy, this idea of multiple tenants within a single cluster, typically via namespaces. How do we have visibility into each of the namespaces, what they're doing, like you said, network costs of running workloads within those namespaces. And this is where Kubecost comes into play a lot. And Kubecost having this open source free version, customers tend to lean in that space first, especially if they are just jumping into EKS, is that they will typically start with the smaller single cluster use of, not too many pods or deployments. This gives them an opportunity to kind of see what Kubecost is capable of. And they're able to implement things like, hey, this is a shared resource, this is a namespace specific resource, are there external resources we have to consider? And as they scale out, and a lot of this goes into production, that's where Kubecost would really come into play as things scale to hundreds and thousands of clusters. And another thing that Zach did mention earlier is, integrating with Kerr to kind of have this piece of information in an overall AWS spending and reporting. And obviously, designing chargeback is more than just having visibilities and printing reports. There's other steps beyond that, kind of making that decision. And I think Zach, he pictured a perfect story from end to end of, this is what we're looking at. Here's the report. What are we going to do about it? What is the decision we want to make? Obviously, the designing and the enforcement of those methodologies. We leave it up to the customers. But the idea here is to, at the end of the day, you have the tools to leverage within EKS called Kubecost that make it much easier for customers and enterprises to make that sort of decision.
So we are reaching the final 20 minutes of our webinar. So I just kind of wanted to, take this chance to remind our audience to submit any questions that they may have using the Q&A tab on the right side of the screen. But in the meantime, Zach, was there anything that you wanted to let us know any further about Kubernetes chargebacks and kind of maybe what you guys have in store for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that I think is really interesting is I've done this a couple times now, where I've worked at organizations, and you start to talk about numbers, and the reaction is often like, oh, we're gonna get our hands slapped, right? Like it's a this awkward conversation, and honestly, the thing that I really like about the approach that we're kind of forced to take with Kubecost is you're getting a central view, right? Like we have a single pane of glass into all of our costs across all of our clusters, and we're using a single payer account, so we're pulling down one cur. When anyone logs in, they're going to see our bill, right? They're going to see where we're spending money. The teams are going to see those things. We can RBAC, we can do some things, but really, it does let you start to build or continue to build, depending where you're at, like a culture of transparency and trust. It's important to empower people, right? Like the way we want people to make decisions isn't through less information. We want to give them the right information. We want to be able to say like, hey, you should be able to see a team's, cost, and they shouldn't feel ashamed by that. And you shouldn't go shame them about it. And you should know that someone's going to be looking at your cost. And again, you shouldn't feel ashamed by it. There may be good reasons you're very inefficient right now in your spend. That could be a perfectly reasonable expectation, right? Like, hey, we have this great opportunity to expand a market, and we want to get out as fast as possible, and we'll optimize afterwards. So we know we're going to be a little wasteful, but on the other side of it, we're grabbing that market share before anyone else can, right? That sort of land grab mentality. Okay, that's great. Like that could be where that team's at. There are other teams who are going to be, they're going to have it dialed in, right? They're using Lambda or Knative. They're doing just pure functional, like super cost optimized work, and their costs are going to look awesome, right? Their efficiency is going to look so good. And then you're going to have teams like, databases. Kind of sucks, right? Like it's got to be there. It's got to be running. They can't anticipate and be nearly as elastic as they want to be. So again, you do get this opportunity to build this transparency. You get this opportunity to empower people to understand, sort of like walk a mile in their shoes, right? Look at the technologies they're using. Yeah, their containers are all stateful, or they're being backed by huge PVs, or you can look at the current, you can see that they've tied into like RDS, and that you can see that like their costs are associated with that. Like you can't go back and be like, oh, well, you guys should just be 100% stateless. It's like, yeah, you know what, you can't. I'm sorry, not for the solution, not for the baggage, whatever the thing is.
So Young, do you have anything for us that you would want any maybe prospective users to know?
We pretty much covered everything, but just know that as you make your journey into EKS, whether you're a customer or users or anyone interested in dabbling with containers and Kubernetes and EKS, just these are things to keep in mind at organization of any scale, is to think about what type of workload you want to deploy and how that's going to impact its performance and scale and as we talked about today, cost, and making the appropriate decisions based on what you think is it's never going to be high performance, high scale, low cost. There's always bound to be some sort of a balancing act that you have to do, and this is with Kubernetes, there's an added layer of having to think about, especially if you have a big enterprise, having to think about different teams within your organization and how cost is impacted by the decisions that they make. So I would say to kind of close everything out, just plan things ahead. Think about implementing tools like Kubecost to help you get that visibility so that when that first report comes in or when that first charge comes in, you're not blindsided by anything.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to take this opportunity to quickly remind our audience that the session was recorded. So following the conclusion of this webinar, you'll receive an email with a link to access the on-demand recording. You can also rewatch on the Container Journal website at containerjournal.com/webinars and then look in the on-demand section. We do also have a couple of gift cards to give away. These are for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. Our first winner is Pablo L. Our second winner is Emmanuel M. Our third winner is Hosiak S. And our fourth and final winner is Robin C. So congratulations to the 4 of you. Keep an eye on your inbox to claim that gift card. And if you don't receive an email, keep an eye on your spam folder. So Zach and Young, thank you both so much for taking the time to sit down with me and talk about Kubernetes chargebacks. Any parting thoughts before we close out?
Don't be afraid to actually dig into this stuff a little bit and think about cost. It's not the sexy part of tech by any extreme, right? But what I would say is that not everything about what we do is writing code, right? That actually isn't. That turns out to be very little of most people's jobs. We have to figure out how to actually solve business problems. And the truth of it is dollars are a big part of business. So we're going to get asked those questions. And I think what Young said about, kind of maybe get ahead of it, maybe start thinking about some of it now. Think about how you're organizing your accounts. Think about implementing some tags. Kubecost docs have some good suggestions on product and org and owner and things like that. Those are lightweight, easy to start with, and they can start to give you even if you don't go down the route of a full-blown multi-cluster Kubecost implementation where you're consuming Cur and all this, it still starts to give you visibility into what you're doing, and it's another layer of data that you can that you can use to drive decisions. So give it a shot.
Yeah, what Zach said, I don't think I have anything in particular to add there. So get started, plan things out, and off you go. Oh, Cody, you're on mute.
Thank you so much. So again, Zach and Young, thank you both so much for taking the time to join me today. I'd also like to thank AWS and Kubecost for sponsoring today's webinar. And my final thanks, as always, goes to you, our audience. We really appreciate the time that you take to spend with us each day. And we just need one more moment of your time to look at a post-webinar survey that should be popping up on your screen right after we conclude. So this is Cody J. Brown signing off. Everyone have a great rest of your day.